Scott from Fabian Liberty. Pretty much everywhere you can find me. I'm an anarcho-capitalist. I'm sure you probably see me around somewhere if you watch these panels all the time. And I'm the crazy asshole ANCAP, the final boss of libertarianism. So check me out. Join, look at the YouTube or Discord or whatever if you want to talk philosophy or just talk shit.
That's why I was hearing boss music. That explains everything.
Hmm.
And with us, Fairy Queen.
Hi guys.
Good to see you.
Hi. Hi, good to see you too. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, Kai. And hi everybody. You can find me at Fairy Queen's Cottage on YouTube and at Fairy triple underscore Queen on Twitter. I am here to make everyone angry. That's my goal, to make every single person very, very angry tonight. So
Ooh, that's a feat. Let's go. And we have the man, the myth, the legend, Lactoid.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Lactoid, you can find me at Lactoid TV on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube.
Awesome. And with us, we have been graced with non-smoker.
Yeah, twitch.tv/non-smoker, Marxist, Leninist, anti-imperialist.
Awesome. And the man that needs no introduction, the vigilante.
I've been on here like what 6 weeks in a row now. I don't think I need to introduce myself again.
All right, today we have one of the most pressing questions at hand. Were Nazis socialist? The socialism in Nazism. Among the almost uniformly liberal historians of Nazi Germany, Rainer Zittelmann stands apart. After a youthful phase of left-wing politics, he has been a lifelong conservative and staunch defender of capitalism who has once had his car torched by the far left. Though he holds doctorates in history and sociology, much of his distinguished career has been spent not on universities but publishing, public relations, and journalism. Zittelmann is, in the self-description of the greatest scholar of the Spanish Civil War, Hugh Thomas, a historian and private practice. His work embraces not only the study of German history, but that of wealth creation. In his popular books about the psychology of the super-rich attitudes toward the wealthy, Zittelmann investigates a group of people who have seldom received objective analysis. The rich, it seems, really are different, nonconformist, intuitive, competitive, with the resilience to survive setbacks. Some of these character traits that mark out the billionaires serve them well, but also intimidate others. Using opinion surveys, Zittelmann has demonstrated that Americans and British tend to treat the contrarian individuals with pragmatism and even admiration, rather than the social envy and hostility that predominate elsewhere. He shows that the proportion of social enviers is much higher in France, Germany, Spain, and Italy. It may or may not be coincidence that over the past century, the latter countries have shown a stronger proclivity for the politics of the extreme left and right, especially in the shape of charismatic leaders who present themselves as tribunes of the people, crusading against plutocratic elites. So we're going to try to figure out today where the Nazis land in this idea. And let's go with opening statements. Go with Gibbs first.
Yeah, so I think what's happened over time is there's been a very big push by the left to revise history. And that is to make things like, say, like the Nazis are not leftist socialists, when they very clearly are, because they don't like the sticky, icky fact that, they were racist bastards. When in fact, if you look throughout history at people like Karl Marx, for example, you can't have communism without racism. Just because he's the founder of it, it's all intertwined. It's all deeply ingrained. Therefore, like that is not a deciding factor in regards to whether they're a socialist government or not. When we look at other chief executives within the Nazi power structure, especially people like Goebbels, it's pretty clear whenever he's saying things like socialism is the ideology of the future. To be a socialist is to submit the I to the thou. Socialism is sacrificing the individual to the whole. Socialism is the deepest sense of service. Like things like this, we are the workers' party. The removing the Burgeois for the workers' class, all these things. These are all typical socialist talking points that he clearly, truly believed in, as well as many of the other people. If you look at throughout the Nazi Party going on, now they did, of course, have like some disagreements with different factions, and they took them out. But as socialists tend to do, once they get in power, they become authoritarian. And I think it's pretty clear to me that they are socialists, as we'll see going forward.
Awesome. Thank you, Gibbs. Scott?
So the question is, are the Nazis, or I guess were the Nazis, right? Not talking about modern Nazis per se, were the Nazis socialist? There really isn't any good answer here to say that they aren't socialist. I don't think you can be. I don't think you can be honest and be an honest, good faith actor and say that they're not socialist. And the reason I would say that is really the question is, what is socialism? right? Because if you're trying to understand whether or not the Nazis are socialists, then you have to go, okay, well, what do you mean by socialist? And this is where like things get a little funny. So, I mean, are we talking about like kind of the original French understanding of socialism before Marxism hits the table? Well, then like kind of like liberal democracy is socialism, and like most movements that are anti-monarchy are socialism. Are we talking about kind of Marx, Engels, vulgar classic Marxism idea of socialism? Well, there's no argument from that perspective that it's not socialism because we're talking about the historical dialectical materialism, this kind of like this marching on away from the contradictions of capitalism and the kind of the crisis of economies and the crisis of imperialism that is occurring within Europe at that time. It absolutely meets any kind of vulgar Marxist definition of socialism by being that. It doesn't matter that it's not left wing. And then we have this kind of more modern interpretation that we get along with the Soviet Union and things like that. That well, socialism is actually just this transitory state, as Marx described, but it has to have these certain characteristics, these certain qualities. And the problem with that kind of final boss definition of socialism is that whatever definition they pick will either get rid of all of the socialist countries and societies that have existed, or it will include Nazi Germany, right? Like I've heard this, it becomes a game of that's not real socialism. It's like, oh, well, the Soviet Union, that's not real socialism because that was state capitalism. Or, oh, China, that wasn't real socialism because, on contradiction actually was directly antagonistic and the dialectic isn't actually understood there. And, critical consciousness was not allowed for. So it's not real socialism. Oh, the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, that's not real socialism because it was a farmers' protest. And they said that we were revolutionaries, not communists. Oh, Cuba, oh, that was real socialism. Oh, you found out that all of our shit is bullshit. Oh, well, Che and, and all of the socialist leaders there, they weren't socialist leaders. They weren't thinkers. They weren't trained Marxists. Anytime you pick a solid positive position on what socialism is, the facts will always show that the Nazi party, the NSDAP, was socialist. And to deny that because of hierarchy or privatization is just to play funny games with words instead of just admitting reality. That the Nazis were socialists. They were an economic left wing movement with some right wing tendencies to it. And that's really all it is.
Thank you, Scott. Fairy Queen.
So this is the part where so I'm both going to agree and maybe disagree. I don't know if I disagree with Scott, but I think I do disagree with Gibbs. To explain why, this is why. So I think that like it's just true. Like I think that if you look at the definition of socialism, and we can talk about the different definitions that exist, but essentially like the idea that all people should be able to jointly use, share, and receive the benefits from both natural resources and goods and services that are collectively produced. I think it's undeniable that Nazi Germany, like that is like what National Socialism attempted to achieve by its the policies that it attempted to institute, by the rhetoric that was used throughout the party. Um, and so I think that, and we can get more into it as throughout our discussion tonight. But I do think it's undeniable that Nazi Germany, like the National Socialism, yes, it was actually socialism. It wasn't simply a denial of it. But this is the part where I disagree with Gibbs, and this is actually one thing I want to talk about tonight. What I disagree with, like, why are we asking this question? The ask of the question is like, well, if you can prove, that in fact Nazi Germany, like that National Socialism is actually socialism, then it lies the feet of the terrors of Nazi Germany from during the 1940s at the feet of the left is the point. The point of the ask of that question is to sort of pin the Holocaust on the left side of the political spectrum and not on the right, which is the reason like why these conversations come up over and over and over again. It's the same reason why people have arguments over whether or not, the Democrat Party or the Republican Party really supported slavery in the United States. It's a gotcha moment. And so my caveat to Gibbs, at least, I don't know if Scott or if Lactoid, if the other people will disagree. I think that like it was certainly socialism, but what I disagree with Gibbs on is the idea that because it's socialism, that means that it wasn't conservative. I think that like there's plenty of evidence to show that just because of the fact that it happens to happen, just because National Socialism is socialism, that doesn't mean that it isn't conservative in nature. That the politics behind it wasn't conservative. That the intent behind it like did not have conservative traits like throughout the arguments. And so we can get more into it later. But that's sort of what I wanted to discuss more. It's a little bit like the word postmodern. It's typically that's a dog whistle, and what it means is far left person when you say that somebody is like indulging like in a postmodern like style of thought. But it's not true that leftists or people who are left leaning are the only people who can be postmodern. There absolutely are conservatives and people who are right leaning who can also be postmodern. And I think the same is true of conservative of socialism. I don't think it's true that like you could I don't think it's true that like it's that socialism is merely the property of the left. I think it is possible for somebody to be a conservative and to also and to also be a socialist or to support socialist policies. And so that's my position for tonight. So
Awesome. Thank you. Lactoid.
Okay, so I think for most of the Nazi Party's existence that we care about, which was primarily during World War II, I think that the Nazi Party was undeniably third way, in that there is going to be some major significant distinctions between how the Nazis ran the country from what we would deem to be socialism now, and especially what we would deem to be any kind of free market economy. Initially, the Nazi Party was undeniably anti-capitalist, leftist, socialist, as much as you can define it, right? Gottfried Feder was the economic advisor for the Nazi Party in the beginning. He's actually the person who brought Hitler into the party. He was an avowed anti-capitalist. He saw capitalism as being part of the Jewish conspiracy, right, in order to undermine labor. And there's a whole bunch of people. And the Night of the Long Knives was really the point in which those elements were pushed out. But there's another element that was pushed out around the same time, a little bit later, but not too far off, that most people don't pay attention to, which was there was also a free market element in the Nazi Party that was pushed out as well by Hitler when they weren't coming to terms with him. So there's a couple names that I'm sure we're going to talk about and include in high positions like the economic minister. They were pushed out when they were saying, "Hey, we shouldn't be having so much state control of the economy." Of course, that didn't serve Hitler's purposes, so they got rid of them. The third way here is kind of there's elements of both that the Nazi Party rejected, and there was elements of both that the Nazi Party also accepted. The big thing that leftists point to when they're saying that Nazi Germany was not socialist was the fact that there was mass privatization. And there was, right? It's pretty undeniable. There was a lot of state industries that were developed during the Weimar Republic that were sold off by the Nazi Party as soon as they gained power. However, it's important to look at where those industries went, right? The privatization occurred. It was sold into the hands of large corporate conglomerates that had direct alliances with the Nazi Party. Reichswerk was one example of this. It was actually the largest company in Europe at the end of World War II, directly controlled by the Nazi Party, and it was a conglomerate of a whole bunch of other companies that were, again, in direct allegiance to the Nazi Party. Stock markets were closed en masse as they were seen as Jewish. In fact, it dropped by roughly 70%. Wages were frozen, unions were abolished, but we had rent controls and price controls, and the government closed all corporations that had less than 40K and mandated that all new corporations have $200,000 equivalent or more, and that the new ones join Nazi Party-led conglomerates. So I think that this is a tale of the Nazi Party wasn't particularly focused on the rights of the worker or the rights of the entrepreneur. They were primarily focused on the right or the power of the party, right? They wanted to disadvantage the state and disadvantage business to simply subsume everything into the Nazi Party to exact complete control and subsumation of all power and land in Europe. So it was 100% big government. And I don't think that there's really any comparison in contemporary America today to the Nazi Party. I think too often that happens where people are just like, oh, you're a Nazi because you think this or whatever. I think that a lot of socialist policies are Nazi-ish, especially the ones being proposed now. But I don't think there's any real comparison.
All right. Thank you for that. Non-smoker.
Yeah, I think the first point of attack on this for me would be sort of just picking apart the actual question and the relevance of it. Like, honestly, what's the point we're trying to make here? Like, are we trying to ultimately associate all modern left-wing movements with Nazi Germany the same way that leftists often associate all right-wing movements with Nazi Germany? Like, all political discourse has this serious issue these days with like reductio ad Hitlerum. Like it always comes back to Hitler and Nazi Germany. Every fucking discussion about politics, Hitler, Nazis, you're a Nazi, you're a Nazi, you're a Nazi. It's not a very useful way of discussing things, right? Because I think the problem is when it comes to things like fascism, which are poorly defined, and Nazism, which are relatively poorly defined, political theories, we only have to go by what reality was. And the fact is, we've never seen anything like Nazi Germany since, thank God. But I will say this. I mean, it's pretty obvious to me that this is often an argument made by like retard level fucking PragerU people to try and say like, oh, well, this is why you shouldn't have healthcare because actually the Nazis had healthcare. It's fucking really brain dead. And a lot of the people on this panel are too smart to buy into that. I'm kind of surprised that, they're going down that route. But I'm just going to point out some obvious truths here. The Nazis came to power partially by persecuting leftists of all varieties, communists, social democrats, labor leaders. Those were the primary groups that they rose in opposition to. Those groups had a ton of political clout during the Weimar era in Germany. Pretty obvious to me that when we try to figure out what is or isn't socialist, Scott is totally right. Socialism is a massive fucking umbrella term. So what you should do is isolate its historical development in a particular time and place. So what was socialism in Germany? Well, socialism was extremely popular in Germany. It had a ton of political representation, and the Nazis rose up pretty much to be a reaction to that and successfully pushed all of those elements out of government, took complete control. And then as Lactoid mentioned, many of what they did was, yes, economic central planning and economic central control. But was that, or was the Nazi system any more centrally controlled than any other wartime government or wartime economy? The fact is, these guys who, Lactoid and Fabian, to them, anything that involves regulation or government is practically socialism. So by that logic, it's like, okay, well, if everything is socialism, nothing is socialism. So, to me, it's important to make distinctions, what is or isn't, right? And it's clear to me that the socialist movement, the real socialist movement in Germany and Italy for that matter, were crushed by these far-right movements. That's why industrialists supported them. Industrialists not only from Italy and Germany, by the way, but also Britain and the United States. So, I don't know. I mean, this should be an interesting discussion, but yeah, that's the basics of my view.
Thank you for that. Vigilante.
Okay, so when we talk about this, we also have to consider like which political spectrum we're viewing this from. So like if we're because like when people talk about this, they aren't really thinking about how complicated the political spectrum is. So like if we're talking about like from just the purely from the economic axis, I mean they're gonna fall closer to the center. Because they had a hybrid system between capitalism and socialism. If we're looking at it from the libertarian authoritarian axis, they're obviously going to be all the way at the top or to the far right, because they were extremely authoritarian. The reality of the situation comes down to the fact that Nazi Germany utilized the version of fascism that was created by Benito Mussolini, which is based off of Sorelian reformist Marxism. But the problem with that is the way that Sorel created his version of reformist Marxism is it basically got rid of all of the key elements of Marxism, the abolishment of private property, and like all of the core elemental beliefs of Marxism, to the point where it basically wasn't Marxist anymore. It was a lot closer to social democracy. And in short, the Nazis were basically no different than like modern American capitalism, where we have basically socialism for the rich, except in Nazi Germany it was more socialism for the Aryans.
All right, thank you for that. So, one of the main questions we have to ask ourselves is back in the 1930s, what would somebody have said if they were defining National Socialism? And does this bear out to be true socialism? I'm going to go ahead and open up the conversation.
Well, they probably would have. It depends where you're asking. If you mean in Germany, they probably, had they heard of Hitler's party, they probably would have referred to the Nazi party. Like that's the thing. We talk about a lot of times we talk about like political theory, and we have this idea that like there's a bunch of systems that we could just choose from. And the fact is, like these things develop naturally, right, from their given context and their given time period. So what you had in Germany through the 20s and the 30s were a bunch of left-wing parties and then a bunch of conservative parties. And you had the National Socialists rise up essentially as a reaction to the dominant sort of political trend of socialism in Germany. And they attempted to adopt, even right down to the name, many of those ideals to try to capture the support of workers, all while being heavy critics of the government in Germany under,
Where did my sound
different
go?
socialist groups. What?
I think he lost his sound.
So
I want to go after Fabian.
yeah, so just a couple of things. So the concept that like social democracy isn't really socialism, I find silly because even Engels stated that like we should be leery in socialism, utopic and scientific, of doing too many revolutions in Europe because there was a real possibility of social democracy in Europe, and that it would be better for the Marxist movement to focus revolutions elsewhere. So again, the process from a Marxist perspective of what is socialism, as kind of as non-smoker was saying, is is that process away from capitalism and away from industry, and for the people, over time, because there are these inherent contradictions in capitalism. So I kind of just take issue with vigilantes, kind of like idea of dismissing the very things that even Engels himself was saying positively as a form of socialism. Another thing I want to say is there is this assumption that Lactoid and others kind of touched on, that they weren't really they were in for socialism in name only, that there was nothing that they were really doing for the worker per se. And I just find that to be just ahistorical, right? So the Germany's Ministry of Labor had a set of list of offenses that you could be fined for, or that you could absolutely have all of your property taken away from you if you exploited the worker. And these included minimum wage laws, overtime protection, mandated vacations, reduction of
Hmm.
hours. You had to provide meals and breaks. You had laws against it being too hot or too cold. You had factory beautification efforts. You had laws against cleanliness. There was a massive amount of state regulation to protect the worker from the exploitation of the capitalists, because of the inherent contradictions in capitalism and the need for like this large state. Also, the other thing too is there's this kind of throwaway thing though. Well, the industrialists, the capitalists were supporting the Nazis. Um, yeah, sure. Some industrialists and capitalists were supporting Nazis, just has occurred in literally every socialist revolution. There have been some people that are industrialists, some people that are capitalists that are, and we're seeing it today within socialist left wing movements today, where there are plenty of corporations. I mean, that's the entire idea behind DEI, or the idea of like stakeholder capitalism from the World Economic Forum, is this blending of industry and capital with left wing economic policies that creates socialist movements as they move further and further left. And lastly, if you think those regulations were bullshit, so from Ted Richer, Hitler's Revolution 2014, pages 80 to 81, quote, the record of court proceedings for 1939 demonstrates that the labor law primarily safeguarded the well being of employees rather than their overseers. During that year, the courts conducted 14 hearings against workers and 153 against plant managers, assistant managers, and supervisors. In 7 cases, the directors lost their jobs. So I think it's very clear that there. Oh, and lastly, the Nazis got more of their money from membership dues than they ever did from industrialists. So I think those kind of just those little bits of data, I think, dispel some of those myths here, that the Nazis weren't a left wing socialist party that happened to have a few right wing ideals. And again, if we start to get specific with our definition of socialism, what you will find is that in order to get Nazism out, you have to get rid of all the other socialist movements at some point.
Go ahead, non-smoker.
Thank you. Yeah, first of all, a couple things there. The Nazis and workers, and the idea that the Nazi Party never gave back to workers. In I think it's kind of important to point out, Nazi Germany sort of got through the war because it sustained itself on fucking slave labor, right? Like work camps where people were forced to work, right? So in terms of, well, I know you want to make that comparison, but not everything can be, excused away by, well, the Soviet Union had gulags. It's a little different than fucking the massing of people into concentration camps based solely on race. Right. So, in other words, the Nazis took large segments of the population, many of whom were working class people, and fucking enslaved them on the basis of their race.
That's not an
But
argument.
second of all, hold on, just let me
You gotta let him finish.
Let me finish. Just let me finish. Just let me
You gotta let him
finish.
finish.
Second of all, they
no, I was just
persecuted
telling them
labor
to make a fucking
leaders
argument.
and they liquidated fucking unions, thus eliminating any democratic control workers had over their workplace. Right. And look, this whole notion that I'm kind of forgetting the last point I made because I'm annoyed about it being cut off thing. That's how that works usually. But look, the idea that the Nazis did only good for workers or whatever, and that was it, the industrialists, right? Sorry. So the important thing about the industrialists and their support of both the Nazi Party and the fascists in Italy is that they chose to support the fascists in Italy and Nazi Germany against socialist movements in those countries. They funded those movements to stop socialism for the benefit of big international capital. That's the whole fucking point. Right? You didn't see industrialists of that nature support Lenin and the Bolsheviks, not in the same way, perhaps from Germany, but it was to undermine the Russian Empire. Right? It's not at all the same to say that, well, industrialists today, like George Soros, supports socialist fucking NGOs or whatever. It's not the same as fucking, international capital supporting the rise of Mussolini, funding his fucking newspaper, or supporting the fucking Nazis and German industrialists urging Hindenburg to make Hitler fucking chancellor. It's totally fucking different.
Not to mention the fact
very
that
quick response. Yeah, very very quick response. So
And then
first
Gibbs.
of all, yeah, they absolutely did, get rid of
And then
certain
Lactoid
unions
after
and things
Gibbs.
like that. That weren't in support of the current socialist power, right? As is common in all socialist countries. And of course, they created the DAF, which is the largest union per capita to ever exist in human history. So I think it's kind of silly to mention that they got rid of unions without also mentioning that they created the largest, most powerful union to ever exist. And I think also, too, it's a little bit disingenuous to say that, well, they're not actually socialists because they're against socialists or that they fought socialist movements, like that didn't happen in Russia. I mean, just one example, 1962, the Novosibirsk. Regardless, it's an electric locomotive plant where you have protesters that are protesting against food price hikes and labor conditions, and the USSR shut them down. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. Is when I mentioned
Dude, they fucking threw the socialists in camps and fucking killed people in mass. They
Just
only
like
passed the
communism.
Enabling Act
Hold
because
on,
they
hold
fucking
on.
banned communists
Hold on,
from being in fucking parliament. How are you going to compare that to the fucking
this is a
Soviet
lie.
Union
This-
cracking
hold
down
on,
on some
hold on,
random
hold
fucking
on.
protest?
That is a cope argument.
This is where we're at.
Dude, you have one little cherry-picked fucking example. The entire existence of Nazi
hold
Germany
on,
is
I
premised
wanna-
on fighting
no, hold on.
socialism.
Couple
Yeah, let the
things.
fat idiot talk.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it.
Just very quick response. Now, I promise I'll step out and let everybody else talk for a moment.
Scott,
Yeah,
by the way, this guy's
I
going to
asked
ruin
you-
your argument by making you sound dumb, whatever he says.
It's really it's really funny that there's like you have less brain cells than you do have hair on your head.
I think socialism was bad. Okay, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, socialism was bad. That's a good one.
Very, very quickly. When
Very quick.
I present evidence and arguments, you say, but the Nazis did things I didn't like and they killed socialists. As
No,
if
you're a
all
fucking idiot,
other
dude.
fucking socialist countries that I mentioned.
No, they're
Cuba,
incomparable
China,
fucking examples.
Cambodia,
They're
and the
totally
Soviet Union
incomparable.
also killed socialists.
Yeah, this is a
go
total
ahead, Gibbs.
cope argument from Mr. Clean over here. Like, I mean, it's really entertaining that he's going to sit here and go, yeah, socialists can't be socialists because they kill socialists." When communists have like factions where they kill other factions all the time. Like, look at the war between Stalin when he took over. Like, first off between Lenin and Stalin, and the what was it? The white.
So why didn't they persecute
Hold on, Papa.
conservatives?
I listened to all your dumbassery for a whole
So
minute.
why didn't they persecute conservatives? Why did they
Listen,
align themselves with
listen, hey,
conservatives?
you literally just bitched about getting interrupted, and then I'm over
Well,
Why
here.
go
did
ahead
they
and
align
finish.
themselves with conservatives?
Hey,
Go ahead
listen.
and finish, Gibbs, but answer his
Yeah.
question as well.
I'm not going to answer this question. I'm going to answer the question you
Because you
asked earlier.
can't, because you're a
Hold
fucking
on. Why
moron.
don't you just pipe down there, pipe size? Like, let me just talk, all right? Here's the thing. So, first off, you said, what is socialism defined by somebody from that era? Why don't we ask some people from that era? National Socialism is the
Do you have me
determination
on hands?
of create a new no, listen, unlike you, I know how to read. I know that's a hard concept for you, so we can go back to that.
I'm not sure
Anyway,
you do.
national socialism is, listen, you can try to like interrupt me every time I talk because I'm about to drop knowledge on you, or you can shut the fuck up and maybe learn something. I know that's a revolutionary concept for you. Anyway, back to people that actually lived during this time. National socialism is a determination to create a new man. There will no longer exist any individual arbitrary will nor realms in which the individual belongs to himself. The time that happiness is a private matter is over. There's another one. Socialism as the final concept of duty, the ethical duty of work, not just for oneself, but also for the fellow man's sake, and above all, principle. Common good before own good. A struggle against parasitism, especially easy and unarmed income. It goes on and on like this. I can even go to their economics. This rhetoric is extremely populist. It's pro-worker. The thing that Scott was talking about earlier is the Nazi joy through strength through joy program, in which they give out a set number of weeks per year that the person has guaranteed for vacation. They have built leisure opportunities, which is part of the thing they do as a nationalization thing. They build leisure things like Alpine hotels, and then they set it up so their workers can go there. They have other implementations, like he mentioned before, where they have like wage guarantees, all sorts of things. These are all social programs and socialist programs in general. Blacktoyd mentioned earlier that yes, they privatize some of these industries, but really that's just another form of nationalization of the industry whenever it's all under the helm of the Nazi Party. Now, I know that you want to sit here and do historical revisionism because you don't like the fact that your baby Lenin and Marx were racist sons of bitches, and all these things that only existed because they wanted to have slave labor by being racist. That's the only way socialism ever can work, is to have a subjugated slave class. Then sure, I understand you're upset, and I understand why you wouldn't want to act like Mr. Clean and try to clean up history to your benefit. Now go ahead, Ajax. Anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, I have a bunch of questions, but maybe the most important one is the one I keep asking that you refuse to answer, which is why did the Nazis align themselves with conservatives if it's just about them trying to eliminate political rivals?
Who were those conservatives?
There were a bunch of conservative
Name them. Name them.
conservative parties in Nazi
Okay,
Germany
name
at the
them.
time that they came to power.
A
You want me to
bunch.
name every
Yeah,
fucking
I do.
party?
I do. I want you to
I mean, I
list.
don't have them on hand. I could
No,
look them up if
you
you don't
just are
believe
making
me.
some bullshit up, and you don't even have the idea for the thing you're going to say. You're saying
Okay,
I'm just
well,
supposed to
so
like believe
there
you that
was
there's a whole bunch
the
of
let's
conservative
see.
party.
I
Well,
actually have it right in
as
front of
just
me, but
because I
okay.
feel Rich was wanting to come on here.
Oh,
His question is, which party is the
well,
conservative party in
Rich will
Germany?
be on later,
Yeah. So
but
why don't
Lactoid
you
has
go
a
ahead and
question.
tell
So
us?
while non-smoker's
Well,
looking that up, go ahead and
oh,
say there, Lactoid.
I got to throw a couple points, right? So when we're talking about the German Labor Front, which was the sort of big union that the Nazi Party put together that everyone had to join, it's important to look at like what the primary focus was, and the primary focus, like everything else in Nazi Germany, was to uh, basically disregard individual liberties and disregard real working standards for the maximization of productivity. And sometimes the maximization of productivity actually required a bone being thrown to the workers now and again, which did happen, right? So you have kind of something contradictory happening at the same time, right? You do have more vacations and beautification efforts and pools being installed in workplaces, while at the same time you have increased working hours and declining wages, frozen wages. This actually fits the motivation of the Nazi Party to just keep everybody at work and keep them working to fund the war effort. That was the primary goal of the Nazi Party. And when you're talking about conservatives supporting the war effort, non-smoker, I think it's, there of course were, but it's important to also look at what is the kind of conservative that was supporting the Nazis really. I mean, the conservatives that made up the key support for the Nazis were former monarchists, former members of the Fatherland Party, extreme militarists, a lot of anti-Semites, obviously, and the owners of these massive industries and conglomerates that had a direct financial interest because they were tied to the Nazi Party. There were free marketers who were kicked out of the Nazi Party because they opposed state intervention in the economy, right? So Hjalmar Schacht, for example, was the minister of the economy in Nazi Germany up until 1937, when he was removed in favor of Göring because he specifically opposed state intervention in the economy. him and a number of other thinkers that were pro-free market comparatively to what Nazi Germany was at the time were excised very similar to the Marxists being excised because they didn't fit Hitler's specific goals of conquering Europe. So, and I feel like you're sort of falling into a little bit what you criticized at the beginning, which I actually sort of agree with the criticism of like, well, everything's a Nazi. It's not. It, sure, you can distinguish between modern day socialists and Nazis, absolutely fair, but you would have to agree that they're primarily the group that's like throwing out the term Nazi against conservatives. It's going to be left wingers, at least in the American context, right? I mean, it's going to be your people who are going to be saying, "Hey, these fucking Nazis in the Republican Party." The conservatives, the Nazis have a lot to do with conservatives. The conservatives were supporting the Nazis. You're really emphasizing that part while kind of leaving out the part of like, oh, hey, like they were kicking out the free marketers that were involved in the Nazi Party at the same time as they were kicking out the Marxists.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead, Max
think,
Walker.
yeah, let me just respond quick. First of all, so it's the German National People's Party, the Bavarian People's Party, and the German People's Party, in case anybody would like to do their research on it. It's like totally a not contentious point. Anybody who can Wikipedia like the 1933 German federal elections would know that what I said was true, but this fucker in the top left needs to like push back on everything. So anyway, there's your answer. What Lactoid's saying, I think, just so people don't get me confused, I'm not saying that the Nazis were like libertarian or that they were even capitalist. I think that they were supported by the industrialists, and I think they were even supported by some liberals to stop the socialists. And it actually goes back to what Scott said before. The Marxist understanding of Nazi Germany is that Nazi Germany kind of came about as a result of the development of socialism in Germany, and socialism being the next stage in the development of the mode of production, right? And so the Nazis sort of formed as this extreme, schizophrenic liberal reaction to socialism in an attempt to sort of disintegrate it and then do this radical shift backwards, right? I think that that's one of the reasons why Nazism is often associated with the term, reactionary. It's a reactionary political trend. It's meant to move backward from the progress of the Weimar era and socialism as a trend more broadly in Europe and throughout the world. And I don't think the Nazis were unique in this. I think what you saw in the United States, for example, I wouldn't call that fascism or anything like that under FDR, but what you had was FDR's government attempt to stop socialism from gaining any kind of political foothold by giving all sorts of kickbacks to the people and using the power of big government and executive orders and stuff like that to try and basically limit the appeal of socialism, limit the appeal of changing and developing the mode of production into a socialist form. So yeah, I mean that's my.
I need to respond to this real quick.
So
Real quick, I have to
Okay.
because respond to
Go ahead,
specifically
and
to a
then
point that I made.
Scott.
yeah,
So
Scott,
I really do. I think that you sort of missed the point here. It's the Nazi Party was not a reaction to the socialists, right? It was a reaction to, or at least
it's not what he means by reactionary.
well, I'm
He
not.
means it the way Marxists mean it.
I understand, right? But but in the totality of what he was saying is he was saying it was a liberal knee-jerk reaction to socialism, right? That was before he used the word reactionary. And I think it's important to because it's kind of slipping in like, oh, this is the reaction to socialism, but really it's more complicated than that because there's this sort of contradictory point of view that was held by Nazis, which was their main goal is simply combating what they saw as international Jewry, which was really like organizations and systems that were opposed to their hegemony in that area. And that included the Soviet Union, for sure, which was made up of Marxists, but it also included the stock markets. It included what they saw as Jewish-controlled businesses. It saw what the liberal, leisure West, right, the decadent West. It opposed anything that and all this together. So it wasn't just socialists, right? It was also stock markets. Like for example, like they went and closed stock markets in mass. I think the total amount of stock markets in Germany dropped from like 23 to 9 under their rule due to specific Nazi action because they saw stock markets as being Jewish. So it's not just a reaction to socialism, it's a reaction to really anything that threatens the party.
Very quick question. The things that you seem to be naming as like not as these things that make them separate from socialist revolutions or socialist, countries. Can you name any that don't also fit those same patterns, right? So when for example, when you were talking about the concept that, oh, they're against socialists, or that they eventually, created a slave labor like system where the state was controlling production, and the state was controlling what you could produce, and the state was controlling prices, right? That they weren't actually helping the workers, they were only throwing them a bone. Can you name any communist or socialist revolution, where the government also didn't do that? Did that not also happen in the USSR, or in China, or in Cambodia, or Cuba?
Uh, well, people are imprisoned and forced to do labor pretty much everywhere in the world. So no, obviously not. And I also can't name a place
I
where
was talking to
there
Lactoid, but fair
wasn't
enough.
like violent crackdown and central control in any communist country, because that's sort of, I mean, you're the end cap here, dude. You know that the state's monopoly on violence is what gives it, power. It's what gives it, its real basis of control, right? So anywhere where there's central government, of course, there's some degree of violence, right? Used against people to keep them in line and maintain control and order and stuff like that. I guess the distinction I was trying to make in bringing up the slave labor systems in Nazi Germany is to say that they intentionally enslaved working people on the basis of race. So the notion that they did things for workers sort of ignores the fact that they took lots, like millions and millions of working people from different groups in the country that were considered undesirable, and on that basis threw them in camps and forced them to do slave labor. Now, I also think there's something to be said about the distinction between concentration camps in Nazi Germany and the gulags in the Soviet Union. There's a lot of serious differences there, the main one being like the body count, right? But even just the
You're
total
going off
number
on a
of people
tangent
per
to a
capita in the
question.
population who were imprisoned there.
You're going off on a tangent to something that wasn't even asked to you. I was asking a Lactoid, but that's fine if you want to answer it, because I mean it's fair. It's an open panel. But
So I thought you were asking me.
you're
I
you're
also thought you were
no,
asking
because
non-smoker, so I'm sorry.
no, I specifically said you twice, but it's okay. Um, my
My
point
bad.
is, my problem here is that you're bringing up things that I'm not bringing up, as if they are an argument as to why they're not socialist. But you're not actually backing that up. You're just saying, because the concentration camps were presumably, in your opinion, worse or had a larger effect than the gulags, which I don't think most historians would disagree
Agreed.
with. Um, that somehow makes them not socialists, or that makes them different in some way. But you're not actually grounding that in anything. You're just saying Nazis are bad. We all agree Nazis are bad, but what we're saying is that Nazis are a socialist movement, and then you're saying, but Nazis bad though, as if that's supposed to be an argument against whether or
No,
not they're
no, you're
socialist.
misunderstanding me. The point I'm trying to make was that you were essentially, unless I'm misunderstanding your argument, which I might be, essentially the point you were making was that one of the claims that the Nazis might be socialist is that, or I think you were actually contradicting Vigilante. You were saying that the Nazis did X, Y, and Z for workers, right? They did things policy-wise that benefited workers, thus proving the fact that they're socialist. Am I misunderstanding the point you made totally?
To be clear, I
I
said
mean,
they
that was
did
one.
that stuff
That
for
was
Aryan workers and Aryan workers only.
Right. And actually, I was
Which
sort of
again,
reaffirming Vigilante's points based on what he just said. But maybe, dude, maybe I misunderstood you in
well.
terms of
So
like
so
me responding wrong. I'm pretty sure you were asking about examples of like prisons in communist countries and all of that stuff. I feel like I addressed that pretty directly. And I
no.
also
So
I
so
but
again,
yeah, go on.
the concept here is that a key marker behind socialism, if you're not going to use a modern definition, right, like a clean modern definition of socialism, which would just be like the state taking over industry for the worker, right? If that is the case, then like it's an open and shut case as far as I'm concerned that the Nazis were socialists. But if we're using
that's
it
not
in
a
a more kind
modern
of like,
definition. That's a conservative definition.
okay,
It's
well,
like
if you would like to propose a separate definition of socialism, right?
uh,
I've given multiple in my opening statement, right? If you like one that you think is better, that is able to keep in all of the other socialist revolutions and countries, but somehow gets rid of Nazis, please be my guest. I concede my time right now. Please go ahead and give that definition.
okay. So the best definition of socialism that most people use. It's the workers taking control of the of industry. It's not the government taking control of industry. It's the workers taking control of industry.
So would the Soviet Union fall under that? No, right?
Yes.
So you would say that the Soviet Union was actually the workers, and that there wasn't a government control
So
of industry,
the
and that there
Soviet
wasn't a hierarchy of like Leninists, and then a much worse situation. You wouldn't call that state capitalism. You would actually say that the workers were in control, not Stalin.
the problem is that state capitalism is technically a variant of socialism. It's not socialism.
Like the workers taking over industry. I'll give you a moment to think of a clean definition that works, right? Like write it down and get like a nice clean definition that we can use that would take away Nazi Germany, but would include the Soviet Union, China, Cambodia, and Cuba, right? Which I think we all agree are socialist revolutions.
Cambodia was not.
Countries.
I don't actually think under the definition you gave, Scott, that like Nazi Germany would necessarily fall under that, because I don't think the goal was.
What is it missing?
Well, I'm about to say it, right? I don't think that the goal was for the benefit of the worker. I think the goal was really for the benefit of the party, right? So we have contradicting ways where they'll throw the workers' bones in order to keep them motivated. Volt. Well, they'll throw the workers' bones to keep them motivated to keep, building the tanks. But they will like force them to work overtime, reduce their wages, figure out ways to keep them in their.
Well, hold on.
Playing the left game of no true Scotsman with socialism, right? Because of literally every socialist revolution, that once the revolutionaries got in power, that they didn't actually care about the workers, and that they enriched themselves, and that they controlled things through a hierarchical structure.
So I'm not playing this game.
Can I ask Scott a question quick?
Let me respond to this real quick, because I'm not playing the game here. Because I think even explicitly, really, at least following the Night of the Long Knives and the removal of the free market element as well, I don't think that they were even explicitly in favor of the worker. They consistently, on their propaganda, on their message, were prioritizing their beliefs on the continued existence of the party, of the German people, of German dominance.
No,
absolutely they were.
No.
I guess we just disagree on that.
He's right, actually. They were. The whole basis of their movement was on the German Volk, right? And oftentimes they use language like appealing to the worker to appeal to the average German. But Scott, I have one question for you, and then I know Fairy Queen wanted to go. I saw her raising her hand, but not that I'm taking over the panel or anything, by the way. But anyway.
Answer his question with a quote.
Sure. Okay, but do very quick, just if you could like write down a note of what I'm going to ask you. Mm-hmm. Do you think FDR's America was socialist?
I think FDR's. I think Republicans are socialist. But that's why I gave you the opportunity to give your definition.
But I'm asking you.
Yeah, obviously, I think FDR was socialist.
Okay, just checking.
He thinks I'm a socialist.
Your definition is just so broad that everything is socialist.
I'm a socialist according to him.
No. I'm doing internal critique, and I'm doing an internal critique.
So by Scott's logic, of course, Nazi Germany is socialist because everything is socialist.
No, you're lying through your fucking teeth because you're trying to get it.
I'm just saying what you said back to you.
Arguing on the merits. No, I said.
I'm just saying what you said back to you.
I said from the very beginning, from my opening statement, that I would consider all of you socialists. It was
exactly
statement. And so then I said it depends on what we mean by socialism. And I gave a definition from the original French before the Marxists came forward as anti-monarchy, as of the people where liberal democracies would fit. And then I said what I would use, if anyone else wants to talk in, is the vulgar or the classical Marxist idea of it as the historical dialectical materials.
What do you make of the Nazis aligning themselves with the monarchists?
Yeah, let me ask you this. What was the percentage of the monarchists held in that election? That's what I'm going to want to know. What percentage of the monarchists? Because you keep bringing that up. What percentage did they win in that election?
Quote to Lactoid.
By the way, just out of curiosity. Because that's the group he keeps naming.
Okay, so go ahead and finish up, Scott, and then Fairy Queen, then Gibbs, you can do your thing.
So from Ernst Rudolf Huber, the Nazi Party spokesman in 1939, right? So well after 34, right? Private property, as conceived under the liberalistic economic order, represented the right of the individual to manage and to speculate with inherited or acquired property as he pleased, without regard for the general interest. German socialism had to overcome this private, that is unrestrained and irresponsible view of property. All property is common property. The owner is bound by the people and the right to the responsible management of his goods. His legal position is only justified when he satisfies this responsibility to the community. Now, the rhetoric and everything is still there that it is for the people, for the worker.
No, I
And
said,
they're
Very
saying,
cool.
wait,
oh
wait,
no,
let me
they didn't
respond to
really
this.
mean it. Then,
Let
then
me
that
respond to
reply,
this.
that's
No.
every fucking socialist revolution.
No,
Very Queens, you have already get the
it's. I'm sorry, but like it's not right. So look, I'm also not a fan of socialism. Of course, you think I am a socialist, so I guess I'm not a fan of myself. But I think that when you look at the socialist regimes, there definitely is like this aura of at least pretending to care about the worker. And you can say that ultimately the actual power interests are within its own.
Like North Korea.
Hold on, within its own party, right? And the problem is, if you want to play this game, right, what you can get to, well, of course, that's not true socialism. But with Nazi Germany, it's
That's the game you're playing, yes.
with Nazi Germany, I think it's different because the focus, the propaganda, and the policies all orient themselves away from like a worker-oriented perspective.
That's not true. That's not true, actually.
And they hold on, and they orient themselves towards a pro-party position at the expense of everybody else. Whether that be the worker having to work longer hours, no longer having collective bargaining, and having lower wages, having their wages literally frozen. Like their employers couldn't give them raises if they wanted to, right? I mean, you have this element of like very much anti-worker element of the Nazi Party. You also have an incredibly anti-business party. One thing that non-smoker has not responded to, or vigilante, is the like if Nazis were truly a response to socialism, why did they close down so many stock markets? Why did they put capital requirements for businesses and close down businesses that didn't meet them? Like that doesn't make any sense. If they're truly this like liberal decadent, like why were they so antagonistic towards private interest? Well, the reason is because they were afraid and concerned and were in competition with anything that threatened their goals. Like it was truly a third way here.
You have not answered my question still, which is what is the substantive difference that you're claiming here between this and the Soviet Union?
So the Soviet Union, okay, so the Soviet Union, the fundamental difference is the Soviet Union was oriented towards a pro-worker perspective throughout its existence.
Difference.
Well, no, it is a difference, right? The policies that the Soviet Union implemented were at the detriment of liberty and the detriment of freedom, and were absolutely in favor of state control. But the justification was we are a vanguard party that's important to establish world socialism, so we're going to maximize the well-being of our citizens.
But they do that. They literally have policies that do that. Actually, like let me give you examples right here. They literally no, not a big difference. So first of all, I mentioned strength through joy earlier, right? One of its the Nazis' most popular policies was to give trips, picnics, very cheap free holidays, along with evening classes, theater trips. All of this was for the workers. All right, so they were giving them like gifts and time off that they'd never had before. They eliminated a lot of these trade unions and whatnot, but they set wages that were like capped at a certain amount. These are all socialist policies that are for the worker by the worker. Y'all mentioned Nazi rhetoric was very like populist with like Volks, like the people's car. Yeah, the reason why they call it the people's car is it's made by the people for the people. That's like the whole like logic behind it. I mean, you can just keep going down these things like these lists. So everything you're saying is unequivocally not true.
No, I have said
we've conceded this multiple times. Like you get access, like they get access to these things, but it's only white people that get it.
That's still socialism. That's still socialism.
Can we hear from Fairy
Queen?
Okay, so there are a couple of things. So at the very beginning of the panel, you asked a question, Kai, which is what would a person from 1930, how would they have understood National Socialism? And would they have understood National Socialism to be the same thing as socialism? I have a person who was alive during the 30s, and he published this essay in 1941. It's The Lion and the Unicorn by George Orwell. So who, for those of you who don't know, like he was a socialist like throughout his life. And what he said, there's a quote like in the page, you can find it. I'm looking at page 26 out of 47. It's specific, and what Orwell claimed at the time was that while there were many features of socialism that National Socialism borrowed, and that the German state implemented, like when they took control of Germany, that there was a fundamental difference, according to Orwell, between between National Socialism and between socialism. And the key fundamental difference was the idea that, like, the socialism, according to Orwell, takes equality of human rights for granted, and Nazism assumes just the opposite. The driving force behind the Nazi movement is the belief in human inequality, the superior of Germans to the other races, the right of Germany to rule the world. Outside of the German Reich, it does not recognize any obligations. And the reason why that quote matters and why this essay matters isn't just because Orwell said it and that therefore that means it's true. The reason why it matters is because, like, this was written in 1941. This was before before the information about the Holocaust, before most people knew about concentration camps, before the true horror and shock about, like, what Nazi Germany was truly available to the majority of people at that time. And so the fact that we have somebody who is a socialist who doesn't recognize National Socialism as being a true variant of socialism, I think is I don't think is unimportant. But secondly,
Two
uh,
theorems.
uh, oh, we can have a back
Sorry,
and
I didn't
forth
mean to
on that.
interrupt you. My bad.
Oh, okay.
I
Well,
thought it was me,
also,
but I
Did
meant.
I just ask for a point of clarification real quick? Are you saying, because I know Vigilante and them are saying this, and I think you were taking issue with this. Are you saying that that because they have race like issues, right? They have race like beliefs and racism and whatnot, that they can't be socialists because
no,
socialism.
no, no,
Okay,
no, no, but no, 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 no.
because
I
that
am
seems
not
like
saying
what his disagreement was with it.
that is not what I'm saying. I don't think that's true. What I'm saying is I think that this word socialism is similar to the word postmodernism, where it's a dog whistle amongst conservative communities to often essentially mean leftism or to mean liberalism. Like, so when you say that somebody is a socialist, like, I understand, like, we're having a different conversation here on this panel, but if you walk out and if you go into, like, just a group of average conservatives and you say, "Hey, that guy's a socialist," you're not really talking, like, you're not really having a conversation about Karl Marx and, like, the repossession of, of capital by the state. You pretty much, like, it's a way of pointing out the person with blue hair and a nose ring that's walking by with a pair. That's what that means, typically speaking. So I disagree with the idea that, like, socialism is merely the property of the left and merely the property of liberals. And this is something I wanted to get into with you, Vigilante. In your opening statement, where is it? You said that the Nazis were no different from modern American capitalism. You just said that it was socialism for the rich, socialism for the Aryans. I think this is an opinion that I have that I'll put forward to the panel. My understanding, the reason why ethnicity and why racism was so heavily pronounced throughout Nazi Germany was that the definition of what it meant to be a citizen within Germany during that time meant that you were of the Aryan race. You are a true German. You are truly of the German people. And so the emphasis upon, like, only for the Aryans, only for those, well, that's because that's how
Just
Nazi Germany
syndicalist
at the time
roots, yeah.
defined, like, what it meant to be a citizen within that country. And that's the reason, like, why, at least that's an opinion that I propose to you on why that is. Secondly, you also said reformist of Marxism, that this was an abandonment of the core elements of Marxism. Uh, I am not sure that National Socialism, like, is that. And to explain to you, and I'm not even sure that Karl Marx
So
or Engels would have agreed with that. And the reason why is because, like, in the Principles of Communism, in the Communist Manifesto, both Marx and Engels described people who were the bourgeois socialists. They criticized, people who would call themselves socialists, but who only sought to remove evils inherent within the evils that they perceive to exist within a capitalist society, while maintaining the existing society, often on such methods such as the welfare system and claims of social reform, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know why you couldn't understand National Socialism or Nazism to fall under socialism, as understood as an example of bourgeois socialism underneath this
yes,
category.
which is social democracy, which is kind of what I implied that it was. Bourgeois socialism is literally social democracy.
Um, I'm not sure about that, but fair enough. So, but basically, okay, so we're saying the same thing. We're just using different words, okay? But then you would agree with me then that just because you assign something as being a socialist policy or as being like a socialist country, that doesn't necessarily mean you're saying it's a conservative or a liberal country. You're just describing the economic system that exists within it. That doesn't necessarily mean like I don't know, like, so like this central tenet of communitarianism, of viewing the state as a living organic body, as having separate organs that contribute to the general welfare and to a larger interest or to the general will of the people, that isn't necessarily merely a liberal frame of mind. I think there are many conservatives who like, and to be sure, like they'll invoke different policies. They care about like different specific issues, but I'm sure I know I could find you examples of people who are staunch conservatives who do view the state and who do view the government as a collective for where we all have to work together in order to achieve an outcome. That's not a libertarian perspective, but I do think there are conservatives who would say that and who hold that position.
Do we have a definition for socialism yet?
I mean, whenever we brought that up, I was going to literally just read you the Oxford dictionary definition.
Oxford. All right.
I actually take issue with the whole definition thing.
Oh, I wonder why. It's amazing that Lip Dick Dana White would have an objection to having some kind of definition. Because, like you mentioned this earlier, that we talked about having arguments of substance. He has not presented any argument of substance. In fact, even when he brought up the like monarchists and whatnot,
Can you spell definition, dude?
I asked what the percentage was of that party that got the vote. Well, I'll tell you what the percentage was. In 1932, that group party that he mentioned got less than 6% of the vote. So it sounds like, yeah,
Which
they
one? I
were,
mentioned
they were a
three.
very heavy conservative party.
I mentioned
like
three.
Lewis. Yeah.
I mentioned three
You
parties.
mentioned the German People's Party is the one you mentioned.
So what about the
They got
other
less
two
than
parties?
6%.
You
What are the
fat
two parties?
fucking idiot.
The point is that you're just sitting here, you're picking
Dude,
very
you
minor
are a
parties
sloppy
that formed a
retard.
coalition. Listen, I know that you think that that's a dunk, but it's not. You've been presented nothing.
No,
of
you're just really
You're over
stupid,
here.
dude. I mentioned
Listen,
three parties.
Listen, Howie Long,
Three
calm
fucking
down. Man.
parties.
It's all right. I'm giving you
But what about the
actual
other
numbers.
two?
Well, what percentage of those numbers are? You mentioned them. You didn't happen to mention the
Dude,
numbers.
there's
Why don't you
literally
mention the numbers?
there's literally a
You want me
chart
to
you
pull up
can
the
look
numbers?
up. It shows
have
the
this chart.
entire
I have
election
this chart.
history from like
Either you want him to
1920 to
address,
19.
either you want him to address you, or you want to keep
Well, I want him
talking.
to.
Right,
I
pick
want.
one.
I will keep talking. I want him, and this is my question. I want him to give the numbers, percentage elected for those parties that he mentioned. That's what I want because he keeps talking about this chart. I have it in front of me. What numbers? So or you want to mention up? Okay,
Brother,
just say
there's literally charts you can look up of every federal
We got it
election
right
in
here. You can go
Germany
look at
from
Wikipedia.
19. Do you want me to
1933.
answer or you want to blubber?
Just tell us the numbers.
I
Let him
don't have
answer.
exact percentages in front
I
of me.
do.
I'm trying to
I
tell
do.
you. I'm trying to tell you. There's literal charts you can look up of the results of every German federal election from 1919 to 1938, which show you the exact distribution of every party and its representation in government. And if you look at them, it very clearly shows a trend that the conservative parties, the various conservative parties, there was not just one, all ended up being consolidated by the Nazis eventually. All of their support was consolidated by the fucking Nazis. It's like not a controversial point. You're pushing back on this, and it's not even really necessary at all.
Well, it is necessary because you want to lump like a percentage of people that's less than 3% of the total vote that are sitting in the elected parties, and it's less than 10% of the total vote overall. So you're sitting here picking like a fringe factor and going in. That's my point. Yeah,
Dude,
it's a
You're
coalition
not
government.
helping us at all.
I am helping this. Hold
No,
on.
you're not. You sound really fucking
If you
dumb,
let me
dude.
just
You're
finish,
making
I
them
think.
look stupider.
No,
You're
I'm not
making them
making
look
this stupid. I
stupider.
just can't
You
finish.
should get
Let
off
him
the
finish.
panel.
Just let Gibbs
him
finish
finish.
this point, stupid or not. Just let him talk.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
This
he
is
should
my
get off
point.
the panel.
You know, listen, you should get off life, but I'm not going to tell anybody to do that in GTA. That's a terrible thing to do. But
Hey, come on, grow up. Tard.
Either way, listen, this is the point I'm making, is we're sitting here, he's trying to lump in a fringe conservative group, which we've already mentioned earlier. I mentioned Rich earlier because this is the question Rich wanted to answer. What was the conservative party in Nazi Germany? Well, he already mentioned three, all right? And even with the three he did, that he refuses to get numbers for and say, oh, they formed a coalition government. Yes, they formed a coalition government and gave them a slight edge that got them elected elected because the alternative was even further left people than the Nazis, which was outrageous to them at the time, right? So yeah, of course you had a fringe element jump in with them, but to sit here and lump in a like group of people that's less than 6% and say, oh, the Nazis aren't socialist leftists because
Okay.
6% of a coalition government sided with him is the most ludicrous, idiotic thing I've ever heard.
Dude, so do you want the
Percentages
numbers for
don't
like a
matter.
random election?
No, I don't. Please don't. Please stop feeding
Can
him
you
this.
just
The
okay,
numbers
listen,
don't matter.
Fabian, I'll
The
stop. Can you
question
just
is,
tell him why he's an idiot?
yes, the numbers don't matter. The
The
question
numbers
is,
absolutely matter.
why did the conservatives align with the German party? It
Oh
doesn't
yeah,
matter
sure,
if
and
they got
I'll
20%
answer
of the vote
that.
or if they got 2% of the vote. And the answer is very simple. Is because they were nationalists, because they were part of an Ein Volk philosophy of blood and soil, because they had racial supremacist views. And
But
those
those aren't
views were
inherently
more
right
commonly
wing.
held. No, but they happen to be more. The nationalism tends to be inherently right wing.
You can have left wing
Um,
nationalism though, like China has it
Yes,
left wing
yes.
nationalism.
National syndicalism is a combination of these things, but that doesn't necessarily. But it doesn't pertain, as you already stated and you already figured out. It doesn't necessarily pertain as to whether they are or aren't socialists.
That
It's
was
a
my
red
point.
herring. It's a design to get you to freak out about percentages and about right wing stuff instead of just simply saying it doesn't matter that they were there because they had some of these values. It has nothing to do with whether or not the Nazis were socialist.
I mean, I would push back on that, but if you want to just go through the
You
elections
can't
of
define socialism.
the German, well, dude, you think it's everything, so you can't define socialism. But German federal election history,
I
just
gave you
look through
multiple
it. Here's
definitions.
1928,
You won't
right?
give
So
one.
you have
Proceed.
the
The
German
important one's
National
33.
People's Party
That's what you mentioned. Why don't
winning
we look at 33?
20% of the fucking vote and 100 seats in parliament.
Yeah,
So
and that has nothing to
1928.
do with 33 though, which is the important one when the Nazis were actually.
33 is when the Nazis came around. They consolidated the fucking conservative vote, you idiot. How do you
That's not
not
what happened.
understand this?
It's not what happened.
So what happened? What happened to the conservatives? Why'd they stop winning support?
Well, partly because of all the Weimar Republic failures.
That's why the conservatives lost support?
Yeah, you're gonna have whenever you're having rampant, like just everybody's having problems. You see a rise of socialist like tendencies and leanings, and so
So would
obviously
you say the
people are going,
Weimar Republic was more conservative or more socialist?
it's more conservative than the Nazi Party, whatever it's in
What
charge.
did you say? It's more conservative or socialist relative to German politics at the time, which you seem to be a fucking expert on?
The Weimar Republic. I mean, is it more socialist? It's less socialist than the Nazi Party.
Okay. So relative to the time period, would you say the Weimar Republic was more socialist or more conservative?
It would be more conservative than
How
the
about
Nazi
relative to
Party.
the rest of Europe? Do you have any idea what the fuck you're talking about?
I absolutely do. Do you have any?
Do you know why the Nazis were so popular and why they opposed the fucking Weimar Republic and
All right,
Bolsheviks
Twiddledee, Twiddledum. Hold on,
This is like
Twiddledee and
10th
Twiddledum.
grade
Chill out.
history, dude.
No, hold on.
10th grade fucking
Fat
history.
bald guy, fat hairy guy, chill out.
Hold on.
Chill
I
out.
get numbers.
Gibbs,
I
chill.
get numbers. I get
Gibbs.
actual quotes, and then you just
Gibbs.
ask another question.
You're
with
literally
no
spurging.
substance behind it, and that's what's happening every single
Did
time.
anyone else here graduate high school? Can they explain to him that the fucking
I mean,
Weimar
clearly you
Germany
haven't.
was
You're the one who has trouble
extremely
reading.
progressive and like a social, essentially
Hey,
like a socialist
non-smoker,
system?
sweetheart. Do we need to put you and Gibbs in the corner, make
Dude,
you a
nobody
old
gives a
man?
fuck what you have to say. You're not moderating the panel. Fuck off.
Fuck you, faggot.
Okay, well there you go.
Why?
TOSing
Not
everybody
necessary.
who's streaming on Twitch, you retard.
Not my problem. I'm not streaming.
Okay, well good thing he's on the panel, Kai. What a fucking asshole. Dude, listen, you obviously never graduated fucking high school. I don't know what to tell you. This is like real basic
I have
stuff.
a degree in
This is,
You
look,
have nothing.
Fabian, Lactoid, anytime you guys want to talk about this 1v1, you're more than welcome to. Fairy Queen, I don't know you like that, but same, right? Vigilante, I love you, but like this guy is a fucking disaster, dude. He has no clue what's going on. He can't have a serious conversation.
Listen, Mr. Clean, I definitely have more of a clue than what you have, based off everything you've said so far. This guy, you repeat the same insult and say, "Oh, I have no clue." Every
I'm
time
gonna
I give
reset.
specific facts that go with this, and
If-
you have
if I
no
can-
actual facts,
if I can
no
interrupt,
data.
if
You
I
just
were
can
have an
wrong about the
opinion.
election thing.
Every
You're wrong
time-
about
every-
Weimar
you're right,
Germany.
every
You don't know how to
every time you-
spell
every time
socialism.
I ask a fact,
if I can
you didn't
interrupt,
go
if I can
any-
interrupt, if I can interrupt, this has been fun, but it's also kind of toxic. So I'm just gonna ask a question, okay? So the
Yes,
question
please.
is, the question I want to ask, what are the stakes of this conversation? Like, I understand, like, and I think it's good. I like that we're talking about like whether or not it's true or not. I think that has value. I think it's important, right? I think it's also important to ask, like, why exactly we are invested in this conversation. Is it just to say,
Yeah.
oh, well, you say I'm a Nazi, well, screw you. Actually, you people are the ones. Is that the goal? Is it the aim of this conversation? Or is there some deeper motivation behind
I'll give it
just
from an ANCAP perspective. I'll give it from an ANCAP perspective, so then everyone else can give it from a more normie perspective, with the exception